He's the world's greatest detective. He's got a crime lab inside his bulletproof limousine. He's got a jet helicopter, exotic animals. He's a third-degree black belt. He rescued Marlon Brando's son from a gang of dangerous and psychotic hippies. He has hooks for hands. One of them is a gun. And if some of this sounds insane, well, let me introduce you to J.J. Arms. Warning, some of this isn't true. Like, at all. I'm going to attempt to separate the fact from the fiction, but I'm doing my best here, man. It was March of 1972. Marlon Brando, yeah, that Marlon Brando, was in France filming his movie The Last Tango in Paris when he gets a call telling him that his son Christian had been kidnapped from a hotel in Baja, Mexico. Now, law enforcement couldn't find him, the FBI was at a loss, so Brando contacted an old friend. If anyone could find Christian, it was J.J. Arms. Arms sprang to work. He claimed to have 2,000 agents all over the world, so the kidnappers wouldn't get far. He got into his jet helicopter and scoured northern Mexico. He spent 3 days and nights without sleep or food until he finally spotted a suspicious Volkswagen near some sea caves. He landed, locked and loaded, went into the camp to confront 8 dangerous and armed hippies. And he found Christian Brando sick with pneumonia. It turns out Marlon Brando's disgruntled ex and Christian's mom had offered these hippies $10,000 to kidnap him. And when she didn't pay, well, they kidnapped him. They took him to Mexico, but Arms found him and brought him back to Brando and became a global sensation. But who was this hook-handed hero? Born in 1932 to Italian and French immigrants outside of El Paso, Texas, J.J. Arms was a normal kid with normal kid hands. 2 of them. Until an older boy brought over some railway torpedoes. Now, these are coin-sized things that they put on tracks, and when a train runs over them, it makes a loud bang, mostly harmless, but it alerts the driver to something dangerous coming up the track. Well, Jay opened the box, rubbed them together, and it blew his hands off. He was supposed to be in the hospital for 6 months, but after 3 weeks, he demanded to be fitted with prosthetics. He got his hooks, and he hit the road. So when life gives you bloody stumps, make lemonade or something, I don't know. He grew up working in a movie theater, and at the age of 15, he graduated high school and went on to get 2 degrees in criminology and psychology from NYU. In 1958, after acting in several films, he returned to El Paso to start his own private investigation business, The Investigators. And he managed to keep it in the public eye with his eccentric lifestyle. Now, after rescuing Brando's kid, the world fell in love with J.J. Arms and his secret agent lifestyle. He was a globe-trotting detective with 2 steel hooks for hands, and one of them was a .22 Magnum. Arms' star was on the rise. He worked with all the celebrities of that era, like Elvis and Barbra Streisand. Now, Arms wasn't the greasy private eye in a beat-up sedan. He was a superhero, and the world was starting to take notice. Before too long, Hollywood came knocking. Arms started popping up everywhere. He was in Newsweek, The Atlantic. He was on the Merv Griffin Show. Here he is with Geraldo. He was even on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where he fired a blank from his handgun at Carson. He wasn't invited back to The Tonight Show. He was in an episode of Hawaii Five-0 where he played the murderous Hookman. According to him, the Library of Congress awarded this the greatest episode of television ever. It's totally a real thing that they do. That's a real award. And he was in 13 other feature films. And he had his own toy. It was totally real. You could replace his hooks with machetes or magnets or suction cups. I want this toy. I really want this. And the whole time he kept cracking cases and solving crimes. In New Mexico, there was a kidnapped girl. He kicked in the door, took 3 shots to the chest, gunned down the assailant, and then took the girl home to her parents before driving himself to the hospital. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. He flew a hang glider into Cuba to retrieve $2 million in assets for a client. He chased a murderer to Thailand. He survived 16 separate assassination attempts on his life. He was one of People magazine's 25 most intriguing people of 1975. And in 1976, he started referring to himself as the world's greatest private investigator. Arms drove around El Paso in a black Cadillac limousine. And I know what you're thinking. That's not very discreet for a private investigator, but he had to have it. It was bulletproof, it had a phone in it, a television, and a mobile crime lab. In fact, his entire fleet of cars, the Rolls-Royce, the gold Corvette, they all had this mobile crime lab Batmobile action going on. His home was a sprawling mansion full of secret passages and security cameras, hidden doors. There's even a room with a giant wall map, multiple clocks with times from all over the world, microscopes, tranquilizer guns. On the grounds of his estate, there was a waterfall, a helicopter, a mock African village that he called Nairobi Village that had elephants and tigers and chimpanzees in it. So he had a lot of set dressing to convince you of how awesome he was. But he was also a third-degree black belt in karate with 2 degrees from NYU. He speaks 7 languages and 33 Chinese dialects. I didn't even know there were that many Chinese dialects. Once, a client threatened to take her own life if he didn't make sweet, sweet love to her. Then, in 1976, as he was running for sheriff of El Paso County, a reporter from Texas Monthly started noticing some discrepancies in his tales. Like any good storyteller, T.E. Lawrence, Frank Abagnale, George Santos, it seems like Mr. Arms had embellished a lot of the facts. J.J. Arms was actually Julian Armas, not French-Italian, but Mexican-American. He was born in the Lower Valley, and those railway torpedoes that blew his hands off, he actually broke into a railway station and stole those. A number of other acquaintances in the 70s pointed out some discrepancies in Arms's lifestyle and his investigations. Jobs that didn't happen, cases where the facts didn't quite line up like he gave them. They painted a picture of a serial braggart, a man whose fish always had to be the biggest. And if you started pulling on the thread of that sweater, it unraveled pretty quickly. I don't know if you guys know this, but private investigators don't exactly make tiger and helicopter money. Speaking of helicopters, the one that he used to fly over Mexico to find Marlon Brando's son, well, there was a helicopter on his property, and the windows were smashed out and it looked like it hadn't flown in a very long time. And Mr. Arms also didn't have a pilot's license. And Brando's attorney actually told him where to find the kid. As for his claims of having 2,000 agents all over the world, well, do the math on how much that would cost. Now, he is actually a member of a private investigator association that claims 2,000 agents all over the world. Maybe that's what he was talking about? Oh, and NYU didn't have any record of him getting 2 degrees, or even ever attending. And he did appear in that episode of Hawaii Five-0, but as for the 13 other movies, no one has seen them or been able to prove that they exist. For every outrageous claim, there's another one that did happen. Kind of. Maybe not the way that Arms described it exactly, but it's those half-truths and the sheer amount of embellishments that make it difficult to separate the man from the myth. Every time you tell someone about J.J. Arms, you have to reassure them, no, he's a real person. A retired Army colonel once said, "Jay is not a scholar of evidence. We've had to reject several of his cases because the evidence just wasn't there. It appears to me that he lives in a type of fantasy world. He reads an adventure story, and a week later, he tries to relive it." J.J. Arms sold his estate in 2020. It has since been demolished, but he's still alive and working in El Paso, Texas.